Hello everyone, welcome to SAP TechEd 2022 and thanks for joining. I hope you are doing fine. You're here to attend hands-on session AD181, and in this session you will learn how to build a backend using SAP Cloud Application Programming Model and then compose a cross-platform mobile application using SAP Mobile Development Kit. My name is Jitendra Kansal. I'm product manager for SAP Mobile Development Kit. And I have with me my colleague David, who is our expert for SAP Cloud Application Programming Model. We also have our colleagues join us supporting that Q&A chat. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to post your question there. Okay, so let's get started. For today's session, we'll start with some overview on the technology that we'll be touching throughout the session. So we'll start with SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, mobile services, and overview on MDK, and then we'll directly jump on hands-on exercises. So when we look at the BTP offering in general, so we have 5 pillars, right? So Business Technology Platform is our unified, business-centric, and open platform that enables to focus on solving business needs that our customers, our partners, and our internal teams have, right? And when we look at the capabilities that BTP offers, it has 5 pillars, right? And each pillar has a set of services and products. So when we look at the service and product under app development, so here it helps in building and innovating line of business, an industry-specific solution. Similarly, service and product under automation, pillar helps in automating and optimizing business processes. Integration helps in connecting API, process, events across various systems. Data analytics helps in driving actionable items by integrating and modeling data. And finally, AI helps in infusing intelligences into business processes by intelligent technologies and AI models. Now, when we look at the tooling for the professional developers being offered on SAP BTP, it starts from UI. It starts for the UI layer to the backend to the storage and runtime. And the blocks highlighted in the slide that is something we are going to touch in this session. So we'll start with building a backend service using SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, and then we'll deploy that to the SAP BTP HANA Cloud as a persistent layer. And for the UI development, we will use Mobile Development Kit, and mobile services is a runtime for MDK. Right. So then let's go and hear more about SAP Cloud Application Programming Model from our expert David.
Yeah, hello. So in the next few minutes, I want to quickly, just briefly, introduce the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, which is a set of technologies and tools to build backends, usually in the SAP ecosystem. And the mobile app you're going to develop in this session is also going to use this backend built with CAP. And this backend is then able to serve data using the OData protocol. Now, what is CAP? Just imagine you would like to develop an enterprise-grade backend. So there's a lot of things you would need to do. You usually have a lot of requirements. You want to, for example, support CRUD operation. That means create, read, update, or delete operations on data. For example, you want to query your data in an efficient way. You don't want any over or under fetching. So you also would need to have some kind of higher level protocol. And 2 important choices here are OData, which is very popular inside of SAP, and also GraphQL, which is also popular outside of SAP. And you want to support things like authorization. You want to integrate with Access UAA. You want to connect to various systems like databases, for example, SAP HANA, or messaging systems like SAP Event Mesh. You want to talk to remote services like SAP S/4HANA. You want enterprise qualities like localization, temporal data, audit logging, resilience, and combine it with other technologies like, for example, Fiori Elements. And just imagine you would need to do all that manually using the common open source frameworks out there. That would require a lot of effort and a lot of plumbing. And here CAP comes into play. So CAP complements cloud-native technologies with domain-driven modeling powered by CDS. So CDS stands for Core Data Services. And in CAP, most of the stuff you do is declarative. So you tell us what you want, not how you want it. And you can model your domain in a specialized language, which makes it quite concise and also easy to understand. So it's a service and event-centric approach, and the runtimes, they support this approach. So we use, for example, events as some kind of extension points. So there are a fixed set of events where you can plug your application code in if you want to override some generic functionality. We allow you to query data from all kinds of data sources. So just imagine you want to retrieve data from a database using powerful querying mechanisms. We have this one mechanism which lets you do that. And the cool thing about that is that you can use the same mechanism to also retrieve data from, let's say, remote OData services. So we kind of abstracted away the data source, and it's quite easy and fun to use. So we provide first-class support for SAP Fiori Elements as well as SAP HANA, and also the SAP Business Application Studio, which is a great way to develop applications because you don't have to set up many things on your local computer, and you can just, jumpstart right into it. And the Business Application Studio is also the IDE which we're going to use later. So CAP comes with 2 runtimes which you can choose. It's either the programming language Java, or you can use the Node.js runtime environment. So the key benefits and value propositions are basically that CAP allows you to have some kind of evolutionary development. That means you can start with a very simple basic CAP app without setting up any systems, completely on your machine. And then later grow as you go, add more systems, at the SAP HANA database and other systems. And it's quite a nice process. You can actually focus on your domain. You don't have to do all this plumbing stuff. You can just declare your entities, how entities relate to each other, and you tell us what, not how. You get the proven best practices. They are served out of the box. So we try to provide sensible defaults for everything. Your development will be accelerated because you can actually focus on the things which are important, and your investments are safeguarded. So for example, we have this abstraction also over the platform. That means it can run on Cloud Foundry or on Kuma if you at some point want to migrate. So it's safeguarded. Yeah, and with that, I hand over to Jitendra.
All right, thank you, David. So now let's look briefly on SAP Mobile Services. Let's take a step back and look at how traditionally enterprise mobile solutions are built. Right? Enterprise mobile solution exists since many years, right? So they start with a point-to-point connection. So meaning there's one mobile device, there's one backend, and there's one developer who's able to develop the application and support this application, right? And the way app connect is enterprise Wi-Fi or cable, right? But what has happened in the last 7 to 10 years is the more and more devices have entered into the corporate world. And so those devices aim is to enable more and more backend to bring more and more data. And what has ended up is this web of point-to-point connections. Now, this web of point-to-point connections brings several challenges. So when we look at from the administrator or IT perspective, right, the challenges in terms of security, right? So they have no idea who is accessing what data, how the data is traveling, what data gets stored on what devices, right? And how they can enforce authorize, right? But then also in terms of maintenance, right? So how they can maintain this set of applications, right? How they can provide support, right? And now when we look at from the developer's point of view, right? Now there's more and more backends, so they need to understand how to access the data and what is the API for this, right? And then also because it's not only one mobile device, there are various devices with various form factors. So how to basically support those kind of devices, how to authenticate, right? And how to exchange the data, right? How to store the data. And last but not least, the last persona is end user, right? End users are nowadays experts. They all want to have one look and feel when they're accessing multiple applications on their device, right? So with these challenges, We have mobile services with solving these challenges. So what we have done here is we decouple this point-to-point connection and replace it with mobile services in the center, where IT now has a full control, right? So they can use the microservices on mobile services like push, analytics, login, tracing, right? So they can troubleshoot the issues if there's any problem from the end users, right? And then of course they can also handle how to authenticate what backend and what kind of authentication required for a particular backend, right? And then when we look at the developers, right, then we provide SDKs and MDK to build various kind of application depending on the requirement and the skill set. So we have mobile development kit and we have native SDKs for this. And from the end users, this is also important. Now end users can have a single sign-on in their applications, and so that they have a simplified user experience when they're accessing application on their device. And at the end, the mobile application built on SAP Mobile Services provides a unified experience for the end users. Right, so then let's move on and then look at some details on the mobile development kit to understand what it is and what are its benefits and capabilities. The mobile development kit is a metadata-driven platform to build multi-channel applications. So you can build multi-channel applications to run it on your mobile devices, so supporting iOS and Android, and also as a web to run it in browser. It's based on metadata-driven model, and we will see in details in the hands-on exercise. So where you define your pages, your rules, your action as metadata. The MDK app provides you, MDK platform provides you editor of choice, right? So you have Business Application Studio where you got visual tooling, so where you can drag and drop. For example, here you've seen the screenshot on the where you can drag and drop the UI control on the page to generate the UI or screens, and we provide project template to get us started with. And we also provide a Proco development environment in the local Visual Studio Code where you can do your local development. The MDK app developed, so the app developed using MDK can be offline, can be online as well, right? And the experience is native and it follows this Fiori Horizon design. The one beauty of MDK is the simplified app development lifecycle, right? So we often hear the change requests coming from business users or end users saying, hey, we need these changes, right? And with the help of MDK, you can make a change right away, and then without going through this whole life cycle of code signing, distributing the app, you can roll out the changes right away on the fly to the end users. Of course, extensibility is also a key capability in MDK. So we allow MDK app to be extensible so that it helps our customer partners to modify the app according to their need, and they can ship this app in the market easily. Right. So we will do more deep dive on the MDK and the hands-on exercises in detail. So for today's session, we have all the exercises available we have exercises put in the GitHub. So you probably have already received a prerequisite from our TechEd team for the setting up all the required configurations. So if you have already set up the prerequisite, you can follow with us, but if you have not done prerequisite, you can see us watching and follow the exercises later. So for today's hands-on exercises, we have 6 exercises. So we'll start with Business Application Studio and deploy a CAP project to BTP and to generate an auditor service. And then with the MDK template, we'll create a project, and then we'll enhance this project with changing some UI controls, and we'll add a capability in the generated app to allow uploading the attachments. And then we'll change the default layout of the application to a side drawer, and we'll add one advanced functionality to the application, adding user menu component. So we will see this in action in details when we go through the exercises. But just to touch base on the architecture, what we're going to cover is from the flow wise. So we will be using SAP Business Application Studio for both CAP and MDK development. So for the CAP part, we'll have a ready-made projects for you, and which you will clone from the kit, and David will explain details in a minute. And then this project will deploy to the BTP, which get deployed to the HANA Cloud and then also generate an auditor service. And this auditor service, then you will configure in mobile services as an endpoint. And then from BAS Business Application Studio, you will deploy your MDK application to the mobile services app update, which you will then access it from the mobile client on your device. So with this note, I'll hand it over to David to start with exercise 1.
All right, so let me share my screen. So just as a reminder, so we're doing this exercise here, AD181, compose enterprise-grade mobile apps on SAP BTP. And to do this exercise, you had to do some requirements, some prerequisites. If you don't want to do this, it's fine. You can just lean back and enjoy the show. But if you want to do these exercises, you have to follow these steps. So basically, you would create a Cloud Foundry space, set up an SAP HANA instance, and things like that, and set up a Business Application Studio. But we're not going to do this here. I'm not going to show this here. I will directly jumpstart to the first exercise, deploy a CAP business service to SAP Business Technology Platform. So focus of this is to basically clone this repository where this CAP app is already built and deploy it to Cloud Foundry. So there's one thing you absolutely need to have. That's the SAP HANA instance, because if you want to deploy it to Cloud Foundry, then you need an SAP HANA instance. So you also have to make sure that it's running. If it's not running, you have to start it. And of course, you need a Cloud Foundry space and things like that. Okay, so let's start. We start with the Business Application Studio, where all those tools are already installed, so you don't need to install anything. The only thing you have to do is to clone the repository, so you can click on View and then on Terminal, or use the shortcut. And here you can use Git to clone the repository. I'm not going to do this here because it would take a while. It's a few megabytes. I already did that. So you have here this folder of your clone repository with the exercises. And here in exercise 1, you have the subfolder called ESPM main, and this is the main CAP application. So if you look at this structure here, this is, I would say, a typical CAP application. You have your DB folder, your SRV folder, and that's where you basically model your domain. So let's just look at it real quick. So there's a file called schema CDS, and this ending is quite important. CDS stands for Core Data Services. And here you can use the definition language to define entities. You can see, for example, some entity purchase order items, and there must be also some, let's see. Yes, there's also this entity products, which is also the entity you're going to use later. And you can see that you can define various fields on these entities. For example, you can say that you have a key of type integer 64. You have this field category, which is a core computed field. You also have associations to other entities, in this case supplier, which points to one supplier, and so on. And in this way, you're basically quite free to model your entities to your liking. There's also another option to view these entities. You can open it with the CDS graphical modeler. Takes a bit to load. Just a second. So now you can see what you just saw in a textual representation. Now you can see it in a more graphical way. So if I zoom in a bit, you can see here, for example, this products entity, which I've just shown you, and you can see that here there's a link to the suppliers entity. So this gives you quite a good overview of how your domain looks like. Now, once you're done with this domain, you also want to expose these entities in your service. So you also have a CDS file for your service. You can define your service and the entities which shall be exposed in your service. And not only that, you can also provide some sample data. For example, here you can see various CSV files. For example, for products, you can see all kinds of data. So it's just basically a CSV file where you plug in some test data, which you also are able to deploy. Now, once this is done, you can also plug in some custom coding. So if you create a file with the same name as the CDS file, then it's automatically loaded when you start your CAP application. And you can, for example, create some before handler. So whenever a customer is created, then you can do some kind of logic. So usually to start this application, you don't need to deploy anything. You can just run CDS run -- in memory, which will use the local SQLite in memory database. So you don't even need to set up any HANA database just to run it or to develop it. And you can see that you can, query the data. And since it's all data, you can also use all kinds of querying mechanism. You can use filtering, sorting, and things like that. So now we want to deploy this backend to Cloud Foundry, because later on in your mobile applications, you want to use this backend as a data source. So we have to deploy it. And for that, you have to log into Cloud Foundry. So in your terminal, you write cf login. Usually, when you do this the first time, you also have to provide this API endpoint. And this API endpoint, sorry, I have to sign in again. This API endpoint you can retrieve from your Cloud Foundry cockpit. It's just this URL which you have to copy. Takes a while, sorry. So it's basically this URL here, which you have to copy. Then you can plug it in and continue with the login process. So you have to provide your email address and your password. And then you select the correct space. So now once this is done, you can just execute a bash script. Let me do this, and then I will show you what it is. You should always, of course, look at the scripts before you execute it. So now this is working. So what does it do? It's just a few commands which you can also, of course, do by hand, but it's a bit easier to just plug it in a small script. So what it does, it removes a file which is usually not there, just to make sure we have a clean state. Now this is the most important one. It is a command from CDS. It's called CDS add MTA. And what it does, it looks at your project, at your CAP project, and tries to figure out what services it needs, and automatically creates a so-called MTA file. So this MTA file looks like this. Let me open it in a textual representation first. So it's basically a declared set of services which are needed or which are provided. So for example, you provide a service called ESPM SRV that will be your main application, and it will also create a auxiliary service called DB deploy, which is able to deploy the database artifacts, and it will also use some resources, in this case a database. Now once this is generated, we can also change the memory. So this funny line here just does some replacement and adds 64 megabyte as a declared memory specification for the app. You can adjust it to your needs, of course. Then the second most important command is cds build -- production. This will build the artifacts which are needed to then deploy it to Cloud Foundry. Then you install all your dependencies using npm-i. and then you use the MBT tool to build those artifacts into a file, into an mtar file, which you can then deploy using CF deploy. So this process is already almost done. You can also see, what's happening, that, the services are started and it's already done. So now you can see that there's this application ESPM service started and available at this URL. So let's just copy this URL. And let's see if our service works. And you can see this is the deployed application, which is running in Cloud Foundry. And if we go to products, for example, then the first call is always give service unavailable. But if we refresh it, then you will see the actual data from the database. And as I said, this is a powerful OData service, so you can do all kinds of stuff. For example, I can filter and I can say, okay, I want, let's say, the weight to be 170. So I say weight equals to 170. And I should write it correctly. So now only those entries with weight 170 show up. So you can reduce overfetching of data. You can also say, hey, I'm only interested in the name. So you can, for example, say $select equals to name. And then you can reduce, the amount of data which is served by the backend. And OData is quite powerful. You can do lots of stuff. And I'm sure this backend is now perfectly suited for the mobile application. And with that, I hand back to Jitendra.
All right. So what we have seen is what David has shown us the data model, right, and expose the data model as a service with some sample data part of this, but there's no UI. So let's now build a UI for this. And so what I will do is I'll keep the exercise window and my tooling side by side so that I can go through the exercises to cover it and explain also it is. All right. So this is here. Yeah. And then so what I'm going to do is we start with exercise 2 now. So exercise 1, now we have generated the OData service. And before we start creating MDK application, we need to configure this OData service as an endpoint in mobile services configuration, right? As part of the prerequisite, as part of the prerequisite, we already configure the application in mobile services cockpit. Then, so here in mobile services, for the application that we configure, we'll go to the mobile connectivity and add this OData service as an endpoint. We give it a name. Click next. There's no custom header required for this service to be accessible. There's no annotation. And this service does not require any authentication, but this can easily be protected by some configuration and the tab layer. We click next and finish. And this is how we have configured a destination, but it's very important to here is like we test it before we start developing. So mobile services allow you to test your destination. So this icon we see after the ping, it's called launch in browser. This will open a new tab, and here what you see is the same data that we saw when we access the data, when we access the OData service directly. But this time, this is now going via mobile service, right? And then if I, for example, add product, then I should see the data, and then this ensure that your OData service is accessible via mobile services, right? And also a couple of things here to note here. This is, we have not deployed any metadata or any MDK application on mobile service app update. So here we don't see any data. So mobile app update is an important feature for for any MDK app development, because you will be deploying your metadata to mobile services, and your MDK client will be checking with mobile services if there's any update available. And we will see that in details in following steps. And also in the setting exchange, we have configured lock timeout value, which allow app to be inactive, which allow app to be accessible after like 4 to 120 seconds. And now here under user registrations, okay, this is, so once we access the application from the mobile client, then we will see our entry, the user entry under the registered users. All right, then let's get started developing the MDK app. I'll switch into the Business Application Studio. Right, and then we'll start with template. And we select MDK project as template. And here MDK editor provides a couple of templates. So we go with a correct template, which basically generate pages for doing transactions like creating, updating, deleting records. And we give it a name, MDK app. This project name is basically the project for the MDK, which also appear here in the Explorer. Application name is MDK internal name. We select the latest client here in the list. And we set the project to be created under projects folder, the default settings. The next step is service configuration. So what is happening is MDK editor is now connecting to the mobile services for the sub accounts where I have set up the application ID, and it's basically giving me all the details from the mobile services. So we have already configured this application com.sap.teched.ad181 here in mobile services. And then we'll basically bring, also fetches the destination configured for this application. So there is no path required for this destination, so we leave it blank. And we want this application to be offline enabled, so we select this option here, which is by default enabled. And the next step basically fetching all the collections or entity sets for the service that we have configured, like what we see here in the list. And we just go ahead and then select all the data collections. I think this is important step where you can also limit like what data you wanna offline in your applications. Right. So we finish it, and the project is being generated, and it opens as a workspace. So by doing so, we basically we're now switching to the project explorer. So we go to the file, open folder, and select project path here, and then we will now see the workspace as projects. You can override these settings by going to the settings in VS Code here and the settings, and then under remote you can change the settings here. Okay. So the generated project is a ready to go project, but let's have a look and see what actually this project looks like. So one of the important thing in MDK application is application.app file. This is the main controller of any MDK application. It basically has all the information about what is the main page that will you see when you access MDK applications? What is the event that will trigger when you launch application, right? So those kind of informations are there in this file. And so for example, now here you can click on this jump icon to see what's there on the main page. So when you see the first page as a main page, then you will see this list of buttons, which basically display the entity sets here. And then when you click on this, then you will go to the list of the customer. And then when you click further, then you will see the details of a particular customer in this for this example. So we just go ahead and then deploy this project to the mobile services because we want to access this application on mobile device. And what is happening is this project is now bundled and being deployed to the mobile services app update. So this is very first time that we are doing it. Then you will see that once the deployment successful, you will see a version here, and then this also updated to the mobile services side. So deployment is successful, and we see this current revision number is 1. So I'm now switching to my device, and I'll scan the QR code for the onboarding. And to access the QR code for the onboarding, you can access it from the application.app. And click on this QR code icon. So on my iOS device, I have iOS device and I also have Android device. So I've installed this SAP Mobile Services client already on my device. And when I click on open, then it will launch the MDK client. This is the ULA screens. I agree to terms and conditions here. And I click on a scan, which then open the camera, asking to open the camera. So I click OK. And then I scan the QR code. So when the scan is successful, then you'll continue and then enter your credentials to connect to BTP. So the next thing is I can also set the passcode. This is extra layer of security. When you access the app, then you can then you enter the passcode or biometric. Right. So depending on your device, you will enable the biometrics, which can be Touch ID or fingerprint or Face ID. So what is happening now is the MDK client is now checking for the app update. And since we already deploy our metadata to mobile services, it pops you for saying, hey, there's a new version available, and then you can basically say now. So what is happening is the MDK client is now generating, is initializing the offline, and all the data that for this, all the entities will be offline enabled. And what it generates is a list of the collections that we have selected while creating the project. So for example, if I go to customers, then I can see list of customer here, and I can drill down, see that customer details page, right? And I can also go further and then add some sales order to this customer. Right. Right. And then once the data is created, then I can navigate back to the main screen where I have a sync button, which is generated the template. And what it's doing is basically uploading the local changes to the backend, right? And it will also generate a button like update, so I can force mobile client to check for the app update if there's any update available on the mobile services. Since we have already updated the mobile client with the latest metadata, so we don't see any update now. Similarly, I can do the things on Android device. Right, so I've also installed the client from Play Store. Right, so I just go ahead and then start onboarding, similar to what I just showed on iOS. It's a black screen, scan. So I continue here, and then I just go with the usual onboarding. I select the passcode. And I enable the biometric. So here also this similar thing happening now. Client is going and checking for the app update, and then once app update is available, it's showing the message to the message, and then I'll accept, and it will basically initializing the offline store where I can access the data for the communities. Right. So let's now look at the products here. So I have products, and then I deep dive, drill down, and then look at the product details. But here, one of the things that template is generating is a scan, is a search, which allow me to scan a barcode, a QR code. So if I tap on the search here, I click on this icon, and then I can basically search a barcode here, and then if it find a match, then it will show in the list here. So right. So what we have seen so far is the template is generating this correct project where it allows me to create, update, delete functionality. And but one other thing here we see on the product page is here you see the information. For example, here there's a duplicate information showing up, right? So there's server also showing here 2 times, right? And let me also bring the iOS device. So one of the right, and then we see the euro as a currency code, but there's no price associated with this. And there's this value 273, for example, here is basically it's a dimension height. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna replace some of the binding on this product page and show some meaningful data, right? So switching back to Business Application Studio. We go to the product. So here in the pages, we see a list of the pages for the products, and these are all grouped via folders here. So I go to the products underscore list page. Right. And then what I'm going to do here is, so I'm gonna enhance this binding of description by showing some additional information, right? So, so because we have categories showing here in as a footnote, so we'll keep the category as a footnote, but we'll remove the category value from the description and we'll show some other value here. So I click on the link icon, remove the default binding. And here we'll show some dimension. So let me also bring the exercises in parallel. Right. So for the binding a UI control to the data properties, there's a link icon. So we click on this link icon, right, and we remove the default binding. And here in OData object browser, we can search for the data field. So we'll bind this to the dimension parameters that product entity has. So we'll bind to the product div. So when double click on dimension width, then it will generate an expression with binding to the dimension width. And then we will display more than one field here and concatenate it, right? So put a space and dimension width into dimension depth, and make sure that we don't double click on this. Otherwise, the existing expression that was generated will be override with the new one. So I'll repeat that. I'll click on dimension width and then put a space, put X here, and then I select the new parameters under the product and click insert. And I do the similar for the height, and then we can also show the dimension unit. So this way, the description will show this description will show the dimension width, depth, and height, and along with the unit of the dimension. And for the currency code, we will basically use the formatting. So we will use MDK formatter so that we will see the currency value as per our device regional setting. So in some of the countries, the currency code appears after the value, and there's the period or commas as separated depending on the regional settings. So I click on the link icon and I remove the default binding. I select I18 objects here. And from the localized string, I select currency formatter. I click insert, right? And here so what is generated is basically a placeholder for the currency parameters, but it's also generating some extra formatting parameters, right? So I will bind, because products has a currency code as a property and also price. So we will use price and currency code displaying the value here. So I then go back to the OData object here and select price. And this time again, I will not double click, but I'll say insert. And I go to the next placeholder, and then I select currency code as another property, click insert, and I say okay. Right. And we don't need to show the service status here, so we can remove it because we are showing a dimension along with another dimension parameters and in a description property, so we can remove it here. And another thing we want to add here is to add a filter feedback bar. So the filter feedback bar will appear above this product list page. This will allow you to apply frequent filters, and so we will also add as a UI control on this page. And the way you add a filter feedback bar in MDK is it can be added on a section table. So I'll switch to the section table from this navigation. And once I do that, then I will have a filter feedback bar section available here. And then I start adding some collection here. So we will add like a order by name or order by price, and we'll add some filter. For example, like category is, for example, notebook. Like, so it will, based on those selection, the product list will be sorted or filtered. So we'll start adding fast filter here, and when we look at the first filter, fast filter is sorter. So we want to display a name here, and its filter type is sorter. So it will like sort by, and then we'll provide a label. So the label will also appear along with the filter parameter. It's always good to provide a meaningful name to the control property. So we'll just go with order by name here and return values name, right? And similarly, we'll add a couple of more filters here, like 3 more. So there are totally 4 fast filters appear above the product list page. And we'll continue with the price and select filter type as sorter. Put a label, and this is a unique name to this control parameter, and a return type is value, right? And then, so we have now 2 sorter that we have added on this page. We can now also add a filter, right? And for the filters, we can define a custom query group here. And this is important when you want to apply filter as a group, and we will see in action how it works. And then display value So this value will appear again along with the filter parameters. So this time we'll select filter type as filter, I'll put a label height, provide a unique value, and return type is dimension. This is a complex query for filtering the data. And similarly, I'll configure the item 3, which is the fourth filter and the list. Display value as notebook. And here we can provide a filter property because this is a simple filter. So we select filter as filter. Provide a unique name to the control and provide a return value, which is notebook. So what we have done is, if I look at all the filters in this list, so we have two sorters. So we will sort the list of the product by name and then price, and then we will apply filters where we say, hey, give me the list of products where dimensions height is more greater than 30. And then we can also have a filter which then give me the results of the products for the category equal to notebook, right? So that is it. We now redeploy. So for redeployment, we can do the same thing. Right click on application.app and then select MDK deploy and deploy to the mobile services. And once the deployment is successful, then I can force MDK client to check for the app update. And that's where we have update button generated by the template for checking app update. So I click on update on Android client and also on the iOS. Now the update is available. So in Android, I say now, so my app basically initialized with the changes. And then if I go to the products now, my product page has been redesigned with the changes that we added in the editor, right? So now we see the description. So here the description shows up in the second column because of the form factor of the device. But in case of phone, where description basically goes to the footnote value, like fourth row here in the list. And then we also see the filter applied, filter bar here. So if I say order by name, then my list will be filtered by the name here. Or I can say, okay, filter by notebook. So it will filter the list where the category is notebook, right? I can combine this filter with another filter where I want all the products where height is more than 30. So here you will see the list of applied filter. I can also sort it on this similar filter. I can apply it also in iOS. So order by name. So the list will sorted by name here or price, right? And then I can put filters like where list of products get height is greater than 30, and the list of products where belong to the notebook category, right? So this way we have enhanced the template generated project, adding some UI and also replacing the UI with other properties, showing multiple property on a single control. Yeah, right. So with this, we move to the next exercise, uploading a media to the product entity. So when we look at the service definition that we have generated on the CAP service, right? So the product entity is a regular entity and it has a property called picture, which is of type stream. And so the initial state of the CAP service that we generated, it does not have any media, right? And I think it's good to upload some media to or attachment to the product, and then understand how it works in MDK, and then how to access it also, right, in the client. So what we are going to do is we will enhance this product list page. So product edit detail page, and then add a control on this page, and then we'll add some logic to handle that attachment, and then upload the attachment to the backend. Right. So to start with this, we'll create a generic message box, and this generic message is something that we will be reusing in a rule, and override it with some other properties. So I go ahead and then create an action under action. So I can right click on the action, then I will see an option called MDK new action. I give it a name. So I select message action. Right, and here provide a name. I leave the title empty, and over caption is as okay. Right. And then on the product edit page, so which can be accessible under the pages, product and product edit, I add a control, attachment control on the page area. So here on the left hand side, you will see list of controls available on this page. So I can either search as attachment, or I can expand this control panel, and then drag and drop attachment control on the page. Right, and now on the right hand side, when you select a control, then you will see the property pane being appear, and then basically allow you to modify some default parameters. So as usual, we will update the default control name to a meaningful name like picture, for example, in this case, and attachment action type, which allow you to do different things. So here in this case, it allow you to add a pictures, so from gallery or from the photo app, or take a picture. So you open a camera and take a picture, and select file allow you to access the file system to upload like any file like PDF or document. But in this case, we unselect this option, and we limit only to the photos. And attachment at title. So here, if you see this icon here, and if you mouse over, then it will say here it's not supported on iOS, right? So when we add a title here, and we will see this title being appear in Android client. So we add a title and then an attachment title. So the default value is attachment 0, but we can replace it with a picture here, right? So when there's also, so when in the client, when you look at like when we are trying to update a product detail page, and then the default parameters, so whatever value that we see on the detail page for this product being appear here, right? So because these value are by default binded, right? So we can also bind a value to this attachment control, and this helps in showing the existing image for the users when they are going to update or upload image to the product. So what we'll do here is we select, so we click on the create a rule, and when we look at, so I cancel it before I want to show something here. So the template is generating all the related pages in respective folders, right? So under the pages, you have products, and then all the related pages are the products. And then similarly, in the rules, like you have products, and then all the related rules are generated in the product folder. So we will do the same thing here also. So we will create a rule under this products folder. So we select the object type as rule, and select the folder product, click OK. And we'll give a name to the product to the rule products. Attachment, click next and finish creating a rule. And then we'll replace the generated code with the snippet that we have in exercise. So what this is doing, and before I come to this, I wanna explain this in the client here. So here you see in the ICE client here is so for the products and the area where you see the initials, this is a placeholder for displaying images. And if I go to the detail page, and there also a placeholder in the object header. So this is object header control in MDK, and this also has a property to display image, right? And the template is generating default binding on this control. So when I look into the product details page, right? So there's image, and if I click on the object browser to show the value here, and so what is doing here is basically doing this what we call an MDK direct rendering image for this OData entity. So since this is OData v4 service that we have generated from the CAP project, the way you access a stream or media is by appending a stream property. I will also explain once we upload a image from the client how to access that in a browser, right? And then coming to the rule, so what it's doing is it basically checking if there's an image available for this given product, and if there's an image path available, then it will basically create an array and then display the attachment value on this control, right? And there's also important thing to note that the product entity has only one stream property. That means you can upload maximum one image right here. So if user is trying to upload more than one image, then we want the user to alert and saying, hey, there's only one image allowed. So we can also write a business logic alerting the users when in case they are uploading more than one image. So what we do here is we select this attachment control and switch to the events tab, and on value change event, we will create this rule under the same products folder. We give it a name, product underscore attachment on value change. And what this rule is doing is it basically checking the length of the attachments, and if there is no attachment, then it will inform user to saying, hey, please add one product image, or if it is more than one attachment available, then it will alert the user saying, hey, there's a maximum one image allowed for the product, right? So the rule that we have added here, this will alert the user, but then user is still able to upload or attach more than one image. So we want to make sure that when user is saving the record, there's not more than one image, right? So what we will do is when user, so here on the client, you see this save button. So when users click on the save button, we want to make sure that there's only one image uploaded for or attached for this given product, right? So what we'll do is we'll write another business logic here mentioning about the same alert message to the end users, and then once there's only one image available, then only allow user to update this report. Right, so we'll remove the default binding for the save button here, and then we'll get another rule, and we'll generate this rule under the same product folders. Click OK. We give it a name, product underscore validate attachments. Right. So same thing here. If length is 1, then only it will allow user to update the entity, right? So since so template is smart enough to know that this entity product has a stream property, so it has already generated an action. So when we look in the action under products, then there's an action called products underscore upload stream, and this action is actually used for uploading the media to the auditor service, right? Now when we look at here, it's pointing to the entity set products, and this is the read link is basically the current products in this case, and there's a property fixture for the products which is of type EDM stream, and there's already binding generated by the template. And here the binding is basically getting the value of the attachment control. And if you recall, we added a name to the attachment control, and here we look at the exercises. So we provided the name for picture. So if you have not modified this name, you have to make sure that when you are using this action, you will replace this name with what you have in your on your site for the attachment control on product edit page, right? So, but this action. So now what we will do is we will bind this action to the update entity action. So when on the client, when I'm updating a product detail page, there will be 2 requests will be going to the backend. One is updating an entity, right? So if I'm modifying, for example, category or currency code, or here dimension depth, for example, and that's one part. And then once I upload the image, then that will go as part of the upload stream action. So and then we need to now change upload stream actions to the update entity actions of the product. So right here, and I can access this action either by clicking on this, or I can navigate under the actions, products, and then product update entity. And once this product update entity action is successful, I want to upload a stream to the backend. So here under common action properties, the success actions there. So we will remove this default binding here, and then search for upload stream. And under product, we have product underscore stream, and then that is it for this exercise. And we will now deploy. So this time I will deploy with the command line like command shift P, and then it will show up the terminal, and I can select MD command line, and I can select MDK redeploy command to redeploy the project to the mobile services. So once the deployment is successful, then I can check if for the app update. Right. Right. So when I go to the products and go to any of the product, for example, server power pro, right? And I click on edit, and then here I see attachment control being appear, right? So I click on plus icon, and I go to photo library, select an image, right? And if I'm trying to upload a new picture or another picture, for example, I use a camera to take a photo, and then it will alert me saying, okay, maximum 1 image allowed for the product. But then image is still there in the control, right? As you see here. And if I try to save, then it will alert me again and will not allow me to save this record until I make sure that there's only 1 image for the picture. So I can tap here and then delete 1 image and then click save. And now you see the image appears on the object table, object header control on the detail page. And if I go to the product list page, then this also appears in the product list. I can go to the main page and see the changes to the backend. And if I look at my auditor service, so once the upload is successful, then I can verify that upload is that the image is uploaded in the backend. So I access the products, and the product ID is 1624893. Right. And then if I append pictures, this is a screen property of this entity. So now I should be able to see the uploaded image in the browser, right? And we can also view the image in the client. So if I go to the products again, and then there's a more button up over, which also allow me to open the document. If I click on this, then I can also view the image in the client itself. So if I try to edit this again, and then the edit page will now show me the attachment. So this is the rule that we have added to create attachment or to show the value of attachment here in this attachment control. If I do the same thing on Android, right, there's update available. Then I go to the product page, and then I will also see the, for example, I go to USB stick here, and then I edit. Now here you see I have this browse title, which was not there in the iOS, but this is supported in Android and also in the client. I can browse and I add a picture. Right, so I add a USB stick here, and I can also, if I try to add another image, for example, I take a photo of a USB stick. Then it will do the alert here, and then if I save this record, then it will not allow me to upload it. So I need to make sure that I have only one attachment, and if I do that, then I am able to upload the stream here, right? So I can also see the image appear in the object header on Android phone, and also appear as a detailed image on my product list page, right? So this way we have now enhanced application uploading and attachment to the product entity, right? So in the next exercise, what we are going to do is we'll change the default layout. So when we look at our existing applications, here you see a list of buttons on the main page, and there are some toolbar items, right? So we will change this layout to a side drawer navigation. Side drawer is a navigation. It's a navigation bar that you probably be using in an application like Outlook, Gmail, or Twitter, right, which allow you to open a pane, and then you can select various items on the list, and then you can access various informations, right? So we are going to change, we're going to create a page in our MDK project, and then replace this main page with that side door page. So in order to create a page, we'll right click on the pages, and we select MDK new page. We select side drawer navigation page, Twitter name, click and finish. Right, so when page is generated and open in our page editor, here you will see the header section on this page, and then there's a default or there's one item that is also generated as part of this page. So we will add we will enhance this header and add some information. So it will be useful to show the user ID or the login user details. So we will bind this headline control headline UI with the login user. So we are setting this to a target path. The way you access the target path under application app data by going to the control and client data in object browser, and you select user ID. So this application slash app data slash user ID will give the current user ID, the logged in user ID, right? And we can also set icon is circular, then this will show the initials in a it will show the initials for the logged in user. And we don't need this headline, so we can remove this headline for this exercise. Right now here we will show part of this information that we generate in the client. So we will not create this whole chunk of information on this side door, but let's say we want to show customer, product, sales order, and supplier. So we'll add them each one by one under the item. So we select the item 0 here, and here we provide the information about this item 0. So we'll start with the customer. So what we are using here is, you see, we have SAP's SAP icon / action. So this is basically the UI5 icons that we are using from Icon Explorer on the UI5. And for example, if I search for the customer, then I can just copy this SAP customer icon and then and paste it here. So, or I can just replace the last parameter on this, and then you will see that icon appearing here in the side row section. Okay, we give a name. So when I tap on this customer, then I want to open the customer list page, and we already have this pages generated with template. So we'll just go to object browser and select those pages binding to the respective items here. And we add a title. So this will appear like this icon and also title. Similarly, let's add a couple of side door items here, and this time we'll add product. So products here, I give a unique. So this is important to give a name of a meaningful name to the control property, because when you need to access it in object browser, then it's easy to find. Also, when you writing a rule, then it's also helpful to understand what control that you are referring there. In a page to open, we'll bind this to the product list page, and we'll give a title here, products. Similarly, we add the third. Sorry, it should be item 2, supplier. And then here, when I tap on supplier, then I want to open supplier list page. So I can select the supplier _ list page, and object browser, provide a title. And similarly, for the sales order, right? So when I tap on the sales order, then I want to open sales order list page. So this time the sales order header _ list page, and I provide a title. Right. So this is all right. So we have now created a page and then define some and define a section with some items on it. And the important thing about side drawer is in MDK app, there can be only one side drawer page, and that page has to be accessible as a main page, right? So we will update our main page binding to this the overview page, so that when we access the app, then side drawer page will open as a main page. So we'll override the default binding to the overview page, and then we'll redeploy our application to the mobile services. Right. So I check for the update in the client. So here you see there is this hamburger icon. When I tap on this, the pen opens here, and here you see my logged in users. So in this case, my email address and also the initials, and I can access this side drawer by swiping to the right, like when I tap on the edges of the device, and it depends on the device language. So in some other languages, it appear on the right side, right? And another thing about side drawer is it persists the where you are. Right? So for example, I'm on a customer and I'm, let's say, scrolling through the list, and then let's say I leave it on this page where I see Renan is on the top list, right? And if I switch to, for example, go to the supplier to view some supplier details or making some transaction, and if I switch back to the customer, then I will be landing to the Renan where I left earlier, right? So this is a default behavior of side drawer, and this can also be overridden by settings on the page. If I check this on the Android, the same thing also here, right? So, and if I go to any other items and if I switch back, then I will be so the state will be persisted, and then I will be navigate to the page or the area of the page where I left earlier. Right, so this way we have now completed exercise 5. So we have changed the default layout to a side drawer page as a main page, navigating within the application, accessing different informations. And then let's move to the next exercise. Looking at the time, yeah, we have half an hour left, so we should be able to complete it given time. So in this exercise, what we are going to do is we are going to add user menu sections here in the side drawer. So this will appear here, and the concept wise, so what we have done is we are providing a project in our exercises or in the Git repository. And so let me start copy the project, and then I will explain about the project and also further steps that we will be doing in this exercise. So I copy this user menu component project from the Git repository that I clone. And this project is basically has the same structure as my project that I created in a template, right? And what we are going to do with this project is we're going to reuse some of the functionality from this project into our main project. So MDK app, I will call this as a base project, and user menu component, I will call it as component project, right? And this is helpful in a scenario where you have multiple application, and then you want to provide a common functionality in your applications, like providing providing support, right, which is common, right, and all support, or you want to provide some options of displaying the information about the user or the application. So those kind of things that we will be doing in exercise. So we have copied this user menu component from the folder that we cloned, right? And this project has something called fragment. And so what is fragment in MDK? So you can define a fragment, which basically a control or array of control, which can be reused in a part of the page or any other pages as a reusable UI element. And when you make a change in this fragment, those changes will be also updated on the pages where you have referenced this fragment, right? So what we are going to do is we will reuse this fragment in our side drawer page that we have created in our MDK app in overview page, and we will override some of the settings that are associated with this page, right? And there also a folder called application. So we will copy this folder from the component project and then paste it in our MDK app. And here we can provide some values according to our needs here. So for example, application name here, so we provide some meaningful name. So for example, SAP TechEd 181. And then also we will continue enhancing, updating this other variables, a global variable here. So for example, the changes to support, sending to the contact@sp.com. Right, and if required, you can also change the value, default value, the FaceTime and phone. So the FaceTime will appear, this applicable only in iOS, and we will see in the client how it looks like. And the application app definition underscore version, then we will change the default version to 101. Right, and this is what we copied and what we copied from the component project to our base project and added some or enhanced the values. But then what we want to do here is we want to reuse this fragment from the component project to our base application, and in order to do so, we need to update the reference application. And the way we will update the reference application is we go to the application.app file under the MDK app project, and there's a reference application settings, and we click on this plus icon, and what is happening is here you will see list of level MDK application that to be referenced. So we'll make sure that you are referencing the one that you copied in your project explorer. And similarly, we will also do the same thing in our component project by referencing to our MDK app as a base project. Right, so this way we can reference. So this way we can access, the components or the artifacts from one project to another project, right? So the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to create a SIM file for the user menu component, and the SIM stands for component integration metadata. And so this is helpful. This is required when we deploy MDK projects. We want also the user menu component to be included in the deployment. So this way, when we access the app in the client, then all the reference that we have done on from the user menu component project in our MDK app project will be accessible in the client. So what we will do is we will create a sim file in application.app. So we select a project, here in this case user menu component, and application name is the user menu. Click next and finish. And then now we will add some indication points here, right? So that we can specify what we want to override from our base application into the component application. So we start with actions, and in the source, we look for sync started action. And please make sure that you are selecting an action under MDK app. So, and then in the target, we will look for similar action, but then this should be part of, this should be from the component project. All right. And similarly, we will add another endpoints, integration point for the global, because we have some globals variable that we have copied from the component project to our base project. And then also, we also have this app definition existed in MDK app that also we want to override. So I'll keep creating indication point, overriding the global variables from MDK app. So once I select global, then you will see the list basically showing me all the globals variables. So I select app definition underscore version under global and MDK app. And I do the same thing. But this time I will select a definition underscore version for the user menu. And we will also override other variables. And then we can now also do the same for the email variable. Similarly for the FaceTime global variable. And then similarly for the phone variable. Right, so this is how we have added the indication point. So, and then what we'll do is when we now open the overview page in our MDK app project, overview page, then you will see the fragment from the component project will appear here, and which we can be use on our page to show as a section. Right, and then I can just drag and drop here. So what we did in this exercise is, so we copied the existing definitions from the user menu component project to our base project, right? And then we modified them according to our need, right? This is number one. Number two is because we want to reuse the fragment definition and from the component app to our base application. So we created the reference in both the applications. So it's just like, okay, I know you, you know me, and so this kind of trust. So that app, so both app knows each other, and then they can, and their UI definition or their metadata artifacts can be accessible. And then we created a sim file, and that sim file is required when you are deploying when we deploy the MDK app, then we want also the user menu component to be deployed along with it, so that when on the page, when we access this page, for example, then we see the information coming from the user menu component project. So I'll just go ahead and then deploy this project to the mobile services. And because of we changed the layout from default to side roll, and we lost the functionality in the app to trigger the app update, right? Or click on the update. So what we do here is we put the app in the background, or we relaunch it, and once we do that, then we'll see there's a pop-up mentioning about the new version available. So I click on new, and then when I click on the Semberg icon, or I swipe to the left, I will see this. I will see a user menu section screen appear here, and if I go to about here, it will show me the current user, my device ID, and the metadata version, and some other informations. Similarly, if I click on support, then I will see support context. So if I click on the phone, then it will open the phone app, or when I click on email, then it will open the mail applications, but I don't have on my phone. And if I trigger on FaceTime, then it will trigger the FaceTime application, right? And then I can, if I have an issue, then I can also send the logs to the mobile services, so the admin can troubleshoot the problem that I have on my device. So I change the log level to error, and then try again. All right, so all right, so I need to check why it's not working. It worked when I tested before. So this way, when you send the activity log, and these logs can be accessible in the mobile services cockpit under the client log upload functionality or feature. So when we navigate back to the mobile services cockpit, under the applications, we will see a feature called mobile client log upload, and this is where you can access all the uploaded logs and then look into what's going on for the problem that user is complaining about, right? Yeah. All right, so is that update available on Android also? Then I'll also the same thing here. I click on about, then it will show me current users and also the device ID and metadata version. And then also, if I go to support, then I can also do the same thing as I was showing on the iOS, right? So with this, we are reached the end of the exercise, and just to recap what we have learned throughout this exercises is, so we started with the CAP project. We deploy that CAP project to BTP, and we generate an auditor service out of it. And once we got auditor service, we configure the service in the mobile services as an endpoint to be consumed using the MDK, right? And then we created a project using the template, and then we enhance that project with changing the UI elements and adding new controls. And we also We also extended the app displaying attachment control, displaying how to upload an media using the attachment control, and also added some logic handling and making sure that user is not, for example, exceeding uploading more than one image. And then we changed the layout to the side drawer navigation, and the last exercise we added a user menu component or section to our side drawer page to do more stuff, more things there. Right. So we also have added additional support and learning sources here. So once if you want to explore more on MDT and CAP, you can also explore going through these links for additional sources. And if you have an issue, then you can file an issue here under the issues section in the GitHub repository, and we will happy to help you there. All right, with this note, I'll bring my slides back and explore learning.sap.com/TechEd for new career opportunities and see what information is there. And with this note, I want to thank you for joining, and I hope this session was informative. And if you have any questions further, you can reach out to us. And yeah, all right. Many thanks once again, and I wish you good luck for the rest of the decade. And thank you.